The Bible is full of stories that strike modern readers as mythical or fantastical, sometimes even genocidal or despicable. But what bothers me most isn't the gotcha pull quotes about ending civilizations or razing cities to the ground, or even the simple textual inconsistencies in things like numbers and timelines. What amazes me is how many seemingly opposing worldviews can be drawn from what is called the Word of God. We're told that faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God, but the God of the Bible is so inconsistent that he gives rise to countless sects and factions, each eventually collapsing until we're all left with our own personal Jesus. Peace, war, prosperity, vows of poverty. The text seems capable of justifying nearly any moral position. Cherry picking scriptures becomes not just temptingly unavoidable, but completely necessary when these contradictions can't be reconciled with one another. Readers are then left bouncing from passage to passage, searching for both wisdom and validation, forcing us to gaslight ourselves in search of some sort of coherence. And with the Bible now spanning thousands of years and cultures and languages across the globe, it's almost as if this flexibility isn't a flaw, but maybe an explanation for why this text, this specific version of the Almighty, these ancient bits of poetry are still memorized the whole world over. So, if your apologetics, your whispers from the Holy Spirit, or even just your basic reading comprehension skills can somehow shed some light on these mysteries of the faith, give us a call because the show is coming right now. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Today is May 3rd, 2026. I'm your host, Christy Powell, and joining me today is Sara from Leaving Faith. Excited to be doing a show with you, Sara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I am excited to get into it. This is a topic that has always sort of sat uncomfortably with me. Having just grown up believing in the Bible, I'm now a little embarrassed to kind of read the Bible a little more critically and think to myself, like, ooh, I didn't notice that the first go round.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the same thing rereading it now without kind of those rose-colored God glasses on.
Hmm.
It feels really different when you don't have to justify actions anymore and just read what it says.
Yeah, just read the words that are on the page without all of that influence. Well, I know that you and I are certainly not the only people who have an opinion on how to interpret the Bible. I'm excited to hear from the audience about this. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls into us at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And we are tri-streaming today, which is a very modern word that I'm still wrapping my tongue around. But a big shout out anyway to folks who are on TikTok and YouTube mobile. If you're watching us on TikTok this morning and you'd like to talk to us, you can request to join and we'll bring you right up on stage. That's for folks 18 years or older. And while I'm very excited to get into this topic and to kind of play around with the Bible and literal interpretations and figurative interpretations, of course, on Talk Heathen, we are open to all of your questions about religion, secular humanism, atheistic morality, cosmology, philosophy, science, history, life, the universe, and everything. Because Talk Heathen is a production of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. With all of that, let's go to our crew cam and thank all of the hardworking video and audio people, the moderators, notes and stamp takers, the call screeners, and everybody trying to make all three of these streams work. If you'd like to be one of these good-looking people or be a guest on one of our shows or maybe even join us as a host, we're always looking for good people who are interested in being a part of the production. Email us at volunteer@atheist-community.org to get involved. All right. with all of that, Sarah, I know that I definitely come to this conversation with a background of not just believing the Bible, but believing that the Bible was the perfect, inerrant word of God. Was that your experience at all?
Yeah, absolutely. That was my basis of understanding the world. Like, how do
Hmm.
I know if there is a God and how do I know what that God is like? And I absolutely believed that every word of the Bible that I was reading in English was still exactly the word that God wanted. So
Right, sure.
yeah, I did have such a rigid definition of what the Bible was supposed to be.
Yeah, and I know that I have kind of picked up this scab on air a handful of times, so I don't want to spend too much time here. But while I recognize that for most of the history of Christianity, that type of like hyper literal, every single word was specifically chosen by God philosophy wasn't really commonplace. But in our like modern evangelical culture, that is, I think, pretty dominant. I mean, is that fair to say?
In evangelicalism, absolutely. And I think part of it is just how modern Protestantism has gone. If you are Orthodox or Catholic, you have these other sources of authority that tell you about God or tell you how you should practice your religion. But in Protestantism, all you have is the Bible. And so I think as people investigate more and have more questions and want to dive deeper into their faith, that means that we dive deeper into this text. And I think that's also how apologetics came about, because when you really study this text, there's a lot that is contradictory or kind of horrible. And you have to figure out what to do with it if this is supposed to be the only thing that we have from God.
Yeah. So this is kind of the ultimate end conclusion of like a rugged individualist, personal Jesus sort of philosophy, that you're stuck trying to square this scripture where you will see, stories told in different orders, or even with like completely different events, or things that ostensibly we shouldn't be able to argue about, like 20 men versus 200 men. And how do we square all of that? Do you think that most modern evangelicals, I know we're getting a little bit specific, but in that community, are people even aware of these discrepancies? Like, have they noticed it for themselves? Are they choosing to ignore it? How is that operating?
I mean, I think there's different levels of this. So
Sure.
I think kind of the base of the pyramid where most people are would be people who attend church and hear about the Bible from their pastor. And maybe they're in a Bible study or a small group, but generally they have learned who God is and what's in the Bible from hearing someone else talk about it rather than reading it for themselves. So I would imagine that's the majority of evangelicals. And then sort of the next step up would be people who want to read it for themselves. And I think, especially for people who do the plan to read the Bible in a year, a
Hmm.
lot of those plans will have you read like one chapter in Genesis, one psalm, and one chapter in the Gospels. And when you read it disjointed like that, it's so easy to miss these little details. If you read Genesis straight through, you'll see how the narrative repeats over and over again. And if you read it straight through, you'll see the inconsistencies. But if you're reading it in this pattern where you just read one chapter of Genesis and one chapter of Matthew, you're going to miss those. How just the nature of how you're reading it. So I would say that's probably like the middle of how people are interacting, especially evangelicals are interacting with the Bible.
Hmm.
And then maybe the more top tier is people who really get into apologetics. And this, I think, is where you really have to do the most mental gymnastics. So now these are the people who have read, oh, there were only 20 men. Actually, there's 200 men. And you have to come up with an apologetic of, I mean, he said there are only 20 men, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't have been another
20
180
is
that
a
he
portion of 200, right?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, there
exactly.
were at least 20 people.
Right. So that I think it's not the majority of people who end up at that level, but I think that's sort of your last step of justifying the inconsistencies.
Yeah, I definitely hear you. And, it's why we like to point out that the road to hell, so to speak, is littered with Bibles that have actually been read cover to cover. You were talking about that idea of kind of bouncing around or trying to read the whole Bible in 1 year. One of the most damaging things to my faith was when I bought a chronological Bible, a Bible that was trying to organize things so that you're reading passages from Chronicles and from Numbers like as they happened. And so you would see these contradictory passages, or in the Gospels, like you're having the same story presented to you 4 times. And that really broke something for me because I'm seeing how different these stories really are.
Yeah, I mean, even the Gospels, it's amazing how our human brains work. Like if you read the gospel straight through, you read the whole story once and then the whole story again, and you really have to work at it to go and find the discrepancies.
Hmm.
It's just you're not going to naturally see that. But man, having it in a Bible where it's here's this story in Matthew, here's the same story in Mark right there on the page. That, yeah, I can see how that would be really eye opening.
Well, and it was one of those things, like they sold it at the Christian bookstore. It was rather expensive. I think it may have been a birthday gift if you really want to get into the psychology of me as an adolescent, and like the world that I was living in. Uh, and I honestly think it's one of the most powerful tools for maybe opening
Mhm.
people's eyes to all of this. Like, if there are people who are listening to us right now that are like, "Brr, I'm just here to troll the heathens," that's fine. And, believe what you want to believe. But I might challenge anybody who has these sorts of curiosities, or even who is just absolutely convinced that the Bible is wholly accurate, to look into it, to put
Mhm.
some of those stories next to each other and see what kind of gymnastics can you do to square all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I understand why people don't, or I understand why our brains put up those roadblocks so that we don't see it. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it,
Hmm.
and your life is irrevocably different. And that is really hard and scary. So I do have a lot of empathy for people who are like,
Sure.
nope, nope, nope. It all works and I can't look at it anymore. And I get that.
Yeah. Well, so I don't want to like put you on the spot overly much to test your apologetic skills, or anything in particular. But as you're talking about some of these mental somersaults, or some of the
Mhm.
ways that we make this work, do you have any stories for us? Are there any particular examples that you might want to highlight of the types of traps people fall into?
Oh man. So, I mean, generally, what you'll see is people accepting things in the text that they would never accept under any other conditions.
Mm,
Like when you tell someone, let's put together the story of the resurrection, and one version will say Peter got there first. Another book it says the women got there first, and if you are reading a story, that's pretty clear. But apologetics will say, well, no, no, this was just told from different perspectives. And Peter thought he was first, and the women thought they were first. So it doesn't contradict. Um, and I think that it, if reading the text just plainly, if you find yourself saying, yeah, but what he really meant was,
uh-huh.
I think that should be a red flag to you if you can't just read the text as it is. And I think an interesting part of that, though, is I think that type of apologetic is really common for people who are literalists and the Bible is the perfect inerrant word of God. If you can hold that a little looser, that, hey, maybe the Bible isn't perfect, but it is the story of God's people, then I think you don't have to do nearly as many gymnastics. If the resurrection stories are all a little different, well, maybe that's fine if you don't think the Bible's perfect, but just people's records of what they saw, then it's not nearly as big of an issue. So I do think that plays a role in it too.
Yeah, and not to be like overly salty about it, but once we start getting into that kind of flexibility and we start being willing to say like, well, the spirit whispers in our ear and tells us what is true and what is not, then it becomes so much harder to justify going after like these very specific bits from numbers or wherever else about how, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not, men should not lie with other men, and the so-called like clobber verses around homosexuality. Those things start to really fall apart when you recognize that they are right next to other verses about not mixing fabrics together, or about not getting tattoos, when that's such a big part of modern evangelical Christianity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many. My favorite example of this is when, if you ever have a Christian bring up Jeremiah 29:11.
Hmm.
And Christians love Jeremiah 29:11. It's, I know the plans I have for you to prosper you and not harm you, something like that.
Sure.
Um, and, it's written as inspirational quotes all over the place. And it's so interesting to me that Christians will say, yes, this verse in Jeremiah, that's about me today. That applies now. And the rest of the chapter magically does not apply to them. The rest of that chapter, oh no, that was just for Jeremiah. But this one verse,
Right.
that's for
Sure.
me. And I think often we don't think too critically about, well, now, wait a minute. How did I decide which parts of the Bible were only for that person, or which parts of the Bible are for all of us at all times?
Yeah. Well, so when we have these calendars that say, read this portion in this way or at this time, or we're kind of cherry picking in that way. Or, I mean, I knew plenty of people, I probably did this myself, where you would have a problem and you would pray about it and then just open the Bible and see where it fell and kind of run your finger and be like, okay, this is the passage that God has for me right now. How does
Mhm.
that type of approach impact our critical thinking strategies?
You know, this I think happens in almost every area of life in which we as humans want there to be magic.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not a criticism. I think almost all of us want some form of magic to be real. I see it in the work that I do with nutrition. There are so many magical claims about nutrition, and so many people want that to be magic. And I think when we do that kind of thing where we almost are treating the Bible like an oracle, um, being a human is scary and we
Sure.
don't know what's going to happen. And this religion promised us comfort and guidance. And, if you trust in God, it will be okay. And that promise is hard to fulfill when you have a God that you can't audibly hear. In any other relationship, if that relationship is promising you comfort, you can go hug that person and they will tell you that it's okay. To have a relationship, you do need specific words that are actually for you. And so I think we do that with the Bible because we so badly want to hear God speak to us specifically, speak to us directly. And so I think we want that little bit of magic. I think we want something incredible and miraculous to happen. And I don't think that's out of line. I think we just don't know how to get it because every other way we've tried hasn't worked.
Yeah, and I think it's really valuable for you to point out this is not something that is confined to Christianity or to religion. This is what it means to be a human. That,
Yeah.
we're always looking for those not just shortcuts, but things that provide a little bit of comfort in an existentially terrifying reality. And I like to say that there is something almost not just inevitable, but maybe healthy about allowing yourself to not agonize over every single decision, over,
Mhm.
allowing there to be some unknowns. But I also recognize that there can be a lot of danger to this sort of like vibe based interpretation of our cosmology and our moral frameworks. What are some of the pitfalls that come from just sort of going off of vibes in that way?
Yeah, it's interesting. I see the same pattern over and over again in many religions, but also in like new age spirituality, in
Hmm.
astrology, in witchcraft, where we're all still looking for the same thing. And I think like I see the same pattern where it's okay, I'm going to do this prayer or this ritual and that's going to keep me safe or tell me what to do. And then sometimes it doesn't work. And so when it doesn't work, the response is you did it wrong.
Right.
And amazingly, it's the same across all of those different categories. If it's a different religion, you haven't done the ritual right. If it's astrology, you read the chart wrong. If it's witchcraft, you did the spell incorrectly or didn't really claim, your intention, whatever it is. And I think it's all because we want to control the things we can't control and predict the things we can't predict. And I've felt like, especially when I was really deep into charismatic Christianity, I was so at the whims of my emotions
Hmm.
because that's how I interpreted God speaking to me. It was like, what do I feel? What are my thoughts? That's how God's communicating with me. And oh man, it can take you to some dark places because if you're just kind of following your emotions wherever they go, you do throw your critical thinking out the window, and that's a scary place to be.
Yeah, I definitely relate to a lot of that. And since we have Dr. Ben here, I actually want to bring him in on this because this is something that really gets under my skin. Like, my mother is disabled. And so I spent so many times watching her being prayed over. And when she didn't like magically get healed, there was always this sort of implication, this kind of side eye that if she just believed enough, if she just tried hard enough, if she could get rid of all of the sin in her life, if she could let go of her pridefulness, like there was always some reason why she wasn't able to be healed. And I mean that drove a wedge between us. Like I bought into a lot of that and had this sort of like unclear, unspoken belief that my mom was just doing something wrong. And that is such a painful thing for so many people to carry. Uh, Ben, I wanted to bring you in because I know you and I have kind of talked on that idea before, and I wanted to hear more about your experience.
Yeah, this is a huge problem for multiple reasons. But one thing that's really coming to mind is there are actually quite a few problematic beliefs with regard to science that have become pretty prevalent in society. A big example is terrain theory, which is essentially germ theory denialism. And people saying that germs aren't real. The only reason you're getting sick is because you are allowing your internal environment to be out of balance, and that's why you're sick. And this is actually being utilized to oppose the measles vaccine, which is pretty horrendous because we have children getting measles who should not be getting measles. And we know that you can get fatal brain swelling a decade down the road, even if you were like pretty healthy before you had measles. And so it's this idea that if you are taking care of your body enough, if you're doing all of the right things, then these bad things won't happen to you. And so it's not only a way to victim blame and say that you are responsible for the fact that you got sick, it's also a way to essentially shift the burden of who gets to fall and who gets to be alive. Like if you have to
Mm-hmm.
prioritize, are we going to improve physical health outcomes through public health measures? It's easy to say, yes, let's help people through public health if you believe that every person is on equal footing and nobody should be left on their own. But if you set up this divide now of, well, you deserve this outcome because you caused this to happen for yourself, then it's easier for people to kick those people to the curb and say, well, you just don't deserve this. We see this a lot with other kind of healthcare circumstances too. And I bet Sara has experienced this one with obesity. People often blame other people for their body weight and say, well, we shouldn't be helping out people who have done certain actions to impact their healthcare outcomes. And so we can lose a lot of our humanism and our just humanity when we start thinking like that. So like all of this seems like a bit of a snowball or a doom spiral, but these are real world consequences of thinking in this particular manner. So it doesn't stop at religion. This is permeated throughout all of our society.
Yeah, I won't go. I have so much to say.
Please.
Like, I mean, oh man. I do think the perspective in medicine and health is very connected to that perspective in especially evangelical Christianity, that you are solely responsible for you and you are in control of everything that happens to you and you have to fix yourself. I really see that parallel, again, between evangelical Christianity and this perspective that drives things like fat phobia and fat discrimination. It's this idea that if you're sick, it's your fault. And I think that's, I wish I had a great solution, and I do not. But I mean, I think that's, again, all connected to our perspective on individualism, and the modern evangelical Christianity is hyper individualistic. And so I think those are all connected.
Yeah, I don't know about a solution, but one of the courses of therapy that I will often work with people on who are coming out of evangelicalism, like a central tenet is this idea of common humanity, that suffering is a part of life, that all creatures suffer. The fact that you are experiencing pain is not because God removed his protective hand from over you because of your sin. It's not because you deserved it. It's not because of any reason other than bad things happen to people and you are a people, and so bad things are going to happen to you. And that notion, while very simple, is really revolutionary and difficult for people to kind of wrap their heads around sometimes. Like, why is this happening to me? Well, we knew it was going to happen to 1 in every million people, and you're part of that. Just statistically, it was going to occur. But not to be cheeky about it, but one of the ways I often describe that idea of common humanity is that it rains on the just and the unjust alike, which is straight out of scripture, which just kind of goes to further my original idea that you can justify almost any worldview if you're willing to find just the right passage for it.
And I bet a lot of people deconstructing have that same experience where, we, like, when bad things happen, there's still this little part of my brain that thinks like, what did I do to deserve that? Like,
Right.
is this happening to me because I did something bad? And it takes so long to deprogram that from your brain. But I find it comforting now, like if tragedy befalls me or my family, I know logically that it's not because we deserved it. And it's not because the other part of that is like thinking you have to learn some lesson from it, like, oh,
Right.
well, God's taking me through this season of trial so that I can be prepared for something, or I have to grow in my character. And I think it's really relieving that, actually, sometimes it's just bad luck, and sometimes bad things happen to you and it sucks and it's not fair, and you don't have to find the silver lining if you don't want to.
Yeah, embracing the idea of random chance is kind of terrifying because it leaves us to the just vestitudes of a unforgiving, cold existential reality.
Yeah.
And it's actually so much better than to think that every time you spill the milk or that you stub your toe or get stuck in traffic, that it's because of some sin in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think like what I was saying earlier that when I was very charismatic and I felt very what's the word? I was at the whim of my emotions, and like I have really bad skin. I get eczema all the time. And so there's
Mhm.
always something wrong with my skin somewhere. And I remember when I was in grad school, my whole like face and neck broke out in eczema. And I, instead of going to a dermatologist, which is exactly what I should have done, I was like, okay, is this a manifestation of some kind of sin in my life? Like, do I just need to pray, that God is like, remove something from me? And is this God trying to get my attention? I connected it to spirituality so deeply that I spent hours and hours praying for it and nothing changed. And then I went to the dermatologist and she's like, here, have a steroid cream. And it was fine.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That if you want to
Funny how
do something about something, you need to do something.
Right, and with that too, we have to think about how many things are time sensitive.
Mm.
Like I see, especially in the religious or even the alternative medicine communities, this idea. Like I'm just going to use chiropractors as an example because they're really easy to pick on. But they like to claim that they are primary care providers, which they are absolutely not trained in that. But they'll say, oh, well, if there's a problem, like if there's a bigger problem that I can't handle, then it's fine because I'll just send them to the hospital or I'll just refer them out, which ignoring the fact that they don't have the education even to determine what is a bigger problem and what isn't, you're now delaying them actually getting to the right place. And if we're talking about something like a stroke, you don't have that much time to get somebody to the hospital in order to give thrombolytic medication, which can like essentially destroy a clot. You have to be within a very, very narrow time window to get that. And similarly, if you have some kind of cancer or something where your family's praying over you and you decide, no, I'm going to wait and see what the prayer does before I undergo chemo, that could put you in a very bad situation because you can't dial back on the clock. You can't go back and then decide to do the chemo. And sometimes you need to act earlier. And if you miss that opportunity, then there isn't as much chance for you to survive. So it's stuff like this that really annoys me. Like I want to be there for people who are still in that position to where they're not ready to leave their religion yet and be able to meet them where they're at. But I just wish that some of those blocks could go away a bit easier, and then a lot more people would be suffering less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair to say. So, is it even possible to apply logic here? Can you talk people out of these sorts of beliefs when they're not particularly well grounded in in reality to begin with? Like, if you don't care about whether there was 20 or 200 people, are you going to are you going to respond to logic?
No. I mean,
Okay, fair to say.
after I deconstructed, I saw this YouTube video. There was so little deconstruction content, but I found this one because I deconstructed back in 2009. And
Mhm.
there's this video that talked about belief, and it drew belief as like a stool with legs. And so, it said if you have a belief, particularly something like a religious belief, it's held up by all these different constructs. Your belief is not where you read some facts and you accept the belief. Much more, it's held up by your community, your culture. It's held up by your experiences, by your psychology, by your emotions. And those are all legs that hold up your belief. And so even if I come in and I knock out one of the legs and show you a contradiction in the Bible, your belief is still held up by all those other things. And so I'm sure, anyone who's in this space has seen this happen where you show someone a contradiction and sometimes they see it and they're like, huh, okay, I'll have to get back to you on that. But
Mhm.
anyway, I wholeheartedly believe this,
Right.
and it's because it sort of feels like it jams the system because you have all those other legs that are still holding that belief up.
Yeah, if reality doesn't line up with the Bible, then it must be reality that's wrong. I mean, that is kind of the nature of modern faith in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, I have the scariest conversations with people in that regard when it comes to morals and justice because I mean, people waver along or, vary along this continuum, but especially in Protestant and evangelicalism, the idea is that God knows what's just and you don't know what's just. And so
Mhm.
when you see something in the Bible that appears to be unjust, you need to turn off your brain. You need to suppress your own logic and empathy and somehow find a way to be okay with terrible things happening. And it's that same thing of like, well, if reality doesn't match the Bible, you have to, turn away from reality and only see what's in the Bible.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the passage in Job where God, basically tells him off for talking back. Like, I am the Leviathan. Like, you're merely a louse. How could you possibly know what is fair or what is right or what is just? And yeah, did I murder your whole family and ruin your entire life based on a bet? Sure, but I'm God and I get to do that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Who are you to tell me that's wrong?
Yep, absolutely.
That kind of authoritarianism is scary, and normalizing that kind of dictatorship is terrifying.
It is. And it bleeds out into how we live our lives. If you believe that most of the people around you are so evil that they deserve hell,
Mm,
then that changes how you view them. And so many times I talk to Christians about the doctrine of hell and like, really, you think I deserve that? And so often it's like, well, you chose it, or, I guess it's your
mhm.
fault. And you can watch the empathy being turned off that if you can label someone as bad, then anything that happens to them is fine. And I think that has really scary implications for, again, how we live the rest of our lives.
Sure, or even how we as a society address poverty or address healthcare for anybody who has a disease that we're willing to stigmatize or put a taboo around.
Absolutely. Yeah. I I hope that continuing to have these conversations can be one tiny way that we turn empathy back up a little
Mhm.
bit, I think that could be really helpful. I don't know how to do it on a bigger scale, but yeah, I think that would make such a difference.
Yeah. Well, Ben, I have definitely been with you as you have tried to apply the logic. And certainly when people call into this show, like looking to have a debate, it's a somewhat different environment. But what's your stance here? Like, do the facts and the numbers matter? How do we navigate the, I guess, multifacetedness of belief?
Yeah, it's tough because uh, I would agree with Sarah and say that most people do just turn the logic off when it's inconsistent. That cognitive dissonance is really, really strong for people. Um, but it gets very interesting when we get into those scientific discussions because oftentimes they will say, well, my God is bigger than science. Like, you can't prove something using science when it's spiritual because it doesn't work. And then they also try to say that there is scientific or archaeological evidence of their God and of things in the Bible. Like, okay, so your gold standard here is science. You are relying on science to make your biggest points and to try to convince me that
Mhm.
your beliefs are correct. But then when I push back and say, okay, how do we like demonstrate these other parts of your claim? And they're like, oh, well, science can't do that. Okay, so can science do it or can science not do it? Because you're leaning on both sides of this. And so, yeah, I think depending on the person you're talking to, I know for me, when because I came from an evangelical background as well, I was a theist throughout my whole biology degree. But each class I took kind of broke some of that for me. And by the time I got out of undergrad, I was pretty much out of the church. And it was a very slow stepwise process of, wait, no, I was actually lied to in church about what this argument even was. Like evolution was a big one because I thought I understood what evolution was trying to say, and I was completely wrong about that. And so even just coming to that own realization of, no, that's not the position they actually hold. And this actually is demonstrable. Like I remember being in the biology lab, especially the micro lab, and you're doing evolution in real time. Like you're doing it to these organisms. And you're like, how could I say that this isn't real if we're actually doing it?
I know this might be a little bit of a digression, but for myself and all the liberal arts majors out there, can you tell us just a little bit more about this idea? Because I'm fascinated to learn those.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different labs that I think every undergrad biology student does. One of them is with fruit flies. I think almost everyone does a fruit fly lab. And it's really just to demonstrate heritable traits. So you have flies with a certain, kind of the main eye color is red, and then white eye color is recessive or something. And so you essentially breed out like one of those two traits, and it demonstrates that you can control how genes are expressed in different populations. And so, of course, a lot of Christians might come in and say, well, no, that's microevolution. That's not the same thing. But then you think about this and you apply this to the next level of general biology where we did a yeast lab or you do a bacteria lab or something where you can impact gene mutations pretty easily. Like you put the culture in literally like a microwave-like thing and you give it ultraviolet radiation and essentially cause it to have cancer, if it could have cancer. But you cause it to mutate, and then you can like increase that amount of trait in that population or decrease it depending on what your lab experiment is telling you to do. But you have, with the smaller organisms, you have reproduction at a much faster rate. And so you can actually see what macroevolution would do in those smaller populations. And so even though it's not like a bacterium turning into a dog, like a lot of young earth creationists kind of think evolution is, you can see that this really is dependent on timescale and population size and how fast they replicate. So I think some of those principles kind of got me thinking in the right direction. But I think people who aren't open to exploring those scientific concepts are going to have a much more difficult time. And so I think it depends on the person that you're talking to. Like people like me, I think are more receptive to logic and science, but other people I think are more receptive to emotional arguments or personal experiences. And I think that's why I tend to lean into a straight epistemology route, depending on the person, and sometimes it works.
Yeah, no, I think it is important to point out that we talk about religion is this or religion is that. But as Sara said earlier, religion is different to every individual person, like the beliefs, the culture, the community, the different ways that we balance those things, the things that we're looking for from it are all going to be unique. So, ultimately it is much more about meeting the person where they're at. And, my education in psychology, Ben, definitely had a lot of the same impact that you're describing. Sara, you've studied medicine as well. Am I right?
Physiology.
Physiology.
So,
Okay. Yeah. Tell me about your experiences here.
well, what's interesting is one of the arguments that I hear from Christians a lot when it comes to they're arguing that God created everything is they'll talk about the human body. And they'll say, oh, that, how perfect is the human body? And I think when anyone says that, my first thought is, oh, I don't think you know that much about how the human body works. You know,
So many examples.
oh my
So many.
gosh, so many. I when I was in my PhD program, I had to take this immunology class. And so we're really diving deep into how the immune system functions. And man, is that a wasteful system? I mean, we produce so many cells that we never end up using. It also overreacts all the time, and tends to sort of get itself into a spiral that ends up causing a lot more harm than good. And so when Christians will say, just look at the human body, look how perfect it's put together, like, how much time do you have?
Yeah.
Right. That's a big one that I think about. And even I'm going into advanced training for nephrology, and the kidneys are great until they're not. And that's kind of why I love the field, because they can compensate most of the time. But anything you try to do to help the rest of the body work, the kidneys will literally just panic for 2 weeks and just stop working. Like the second your blood pressure is not optimal, they're like, nope, I'm just going to sit here and protest for the next 2 weeks. But then even the kidneys clearly want to be at the start of the show, but then they don't actually kick in for a lot of things until like 3 days after the initial thing happened. Like your mechanism for controlling your blood pH, your lungs are actually working on it right away. But then the kidneys literally take 3 days to start compensating. So if your checks and balances system relies on one system burning itself out over 3 days and then the other one starting to kick in, how well are you actually compensating? And that's when people die during that time frame, when the kidneys don't decide to work. But even like with that, I think one example of where the human body really sucks that a lot of people can be very passionate about is just think about the location of the prostate. Just think about that.
I almost always am.
But it's like, why is it wrapping around the pee tube? And when you get old enough, which most people do, you can't pee anymore because your prostate is just like constricting it. Like,
Sure.
who decided that was a good idea to make it a circle?
How can it
around
be a perfect body? It has an appendix. Like, we've got these waste disposal units right next to our pleasure centers. What are we doing?
Right? We breathe through the same hole that we eat. Bad design. It's not an effective design. But then the answer is always like, well, no, that's because of sin. So
Right.
all those flaws you pointed out, well, no, that's because we live in a fallen world. And then we have to go in a circle.
Yeah, the prostate wasn't a circle shape until sin happened. And before sin, your food hole and your breathing hole were not connected, and they joined up.
Me. The prostate is a sinful organ. I have to say that as the sex therapist on the board here.
But I want to hear the justification for like how like by what mechanism do you think things were different before sin?
Magic,
Like,
right? It's just magic.
Yeah.
A firmament. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about as you get deeper into apologetics, some of the just logical twists and the leaps of faith that you have to make. And I am reminded of the ridiculous education I got about all of the absolutely bizarre ways that we can justify some of these non-scientific ideas. Like, so much of it came down to the flood. You know, there was magic water in the sky that protected us from aging, and that's how Methuselah got so old. That's why our bodies started to collapse after the flood. I mean, there really are these bizarre justifications, and I'm amazed that we live in a culture where I think it's not more broadly known that is in very real history textbooks, that is in very real science textbooks that our kids are learning about right now.
And Charlie, if you're on TikTok, you're welcome to request to join, and then I should be able to put you through via TikTok. If that's, oh, look, yay, hang on.
Well, if that's the case, if we're getting somebody else on, I'll let you two carry it,
Yeah, well,
and I will see you all in a little bit.
thank you, Ben.
Okay, so I think he's up. Charlie?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yay, I can hear you.
Good, yeah. I was wondering if you were like looking for, usually they're looking for a debate or something, and I'm kind of more of a friendly. But yeah, I was just wondering if you were looking for a guest to come up.
Yeah, glad to hear from you. What's on your mind today?
Well, I'm in the process of deconstructing myself. I do still believe in God, but pretty much everything else has fallen away. I actually lived in a Catholic monastery for 4 years. So I kind of went pretty deep in. And I've just been like listening to what you guys talking about, and like how it seems like the way to like convince somebody is, it seems to be like whatever their caregiver or like whoever they respect most, whatever they say is kind of like what they're going to believe, kind of thing sometimes. But yeah, I'm not that great of a conversationalist, but I just wanted to like chime in and say hello.
It definitely is worth pointing out that the vast majority of folks take on the religion, if not of their parents, then of their immediate community, of the culture that's around them. Like if I'm one of God's special and chosen people and that I heard his call and he wanted me to be a Christian, then I guess thank God that he had me born in the Deep South. Right? Like that I was around that type of community and that type of culture. But yeah, it definitely hits us where we live. You know, Charlie, I hope you are okay with me bringing this to bear, but I saw that your screen name was Charlie the hypnotherapist. And since, say that again?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just that Sara had talked earlier about sort of the charismatic movement and how emotions were such a big part of getting sort of sucked into religion. For myself, it was impossible for me to really deconstruct and find a way to explain a lot of my experiences in religion until I got into my psychology degree and I began to actually understand hypnotism and started to recognize how some of those processes work and began to understand that like a lot of the charismatic music that I was listening to was sort of through that lens, that a lot of the experiences that I had in tabernacles and revivals and, you know, church parking lots and all of these types of things were often using lighting and using mood and using some of these like hypnotic techniques, not in a, I think, intentionally or willfully abusive or manipulative way, but in a way that definitely drew me in that I couldn't understand using rational means until I had like that scientific background. How does all that strike you?
Yeah, very much so. I was very involved in the Catholic Charismatic Renewal. I went to the Franciscan University of Steubenville in Ohio, which is a big hub for that. And I experienced things there that I couldn't explain in any other way, like speaking in tongues and actually interpreting tongues, like hearing somebody speaking gibberish and I can understand what they're saying. And like, what's going on with that? That was almost scary. But then I was introduced to Darren Brown, the hypnotist and mentalist. He's also a magician, but some of the things that he does is, and he's an atheist as well, and he can bring about those same emotional states that spirituality does, and he can even show how it happens, like just the rounding music and the touch and just right, doing it just right, you can bring about these like assurances that some divine being is touching me. And when I was able to replicate all of those sensations in hypnosis, then I was like, wow, I don't have much, there's not much grounds left to believe that it's something supernatural, that it's just purely natural. It can be like, I almost want to like change the definition of supernatural as being not above nature, impossible, but just being that level of nature that's like, wow, that is really like seeing a sunset or something. That's not
Yeah, something that feels remarkable or full of awe and wonder.
right. Yeah.
And you said you still do believe in God. So
Yeah.
how has your idea of what or who God is changed?
It's definitely changed into being more of the ineffable God that like I'm much more agnostic about it. I might just be in the process of just at this stage of deconstruction. I've been deconstructing for about 15 years. And I don't know, like I'm like talking to communities that are like helping question me and like questioning my beliefs, what beliefs I have left. And then a lot of times I just don't have answers, like, except for like, I feel comforted by it. Or it's just the foundation that my life was built on. And so now having to go down and excavate all that foundation it would be easier just to leave it there. And like, I come up with ways to justify, but am I just justifying it, or could this just be where I'm going to be in my level? Because I was atheist for a little while, until I realized that if there is no God, then like my father, who had passed away when I was 14, that means he doesn't exist anymore. I'm never going to see him again. All that's left of him is what's in the ground. And that scared me so much that at that time I forced myself to kind of revert back. And thankfully, my spiritual director, who is really more my like second father, he warned me not to do that, because he told me that if I revert back and force myself to go back, I will never mature in any way beyond that point. I'll never pursue truth. I will never be open to truth. And so even though it's hard, even though some of the realizations are hard, even though you might have been happier before, it just, you have to be open to truth, and moving on in whatever shape that's going to appear. And through the scientific method, I've become more like free by it. So
yeah, I definitely applaud that. I do think that there are rational, and maybe we can use the term scientific, ways to get at truth, and that we should, for lack of a better word, like abide by those practices. And as we've been saying this whole episode, our choice of religion, if we want to call it a choice, is less about facts and, logic than so many other factors. So as you've been going through this process, I appreciate that it's scary. How emotionally exhausted are you at this stage? How much self-criticism or self-doubt have you been struggling with as you go through this process?
Quite a bit. And that I think the main issue is that I feel like I'm in limbo kind of thing. Like I don't have a home to go to. I can't go hang out with the atheists, because they're like, wait, he still believes in God. And then, but I certainly can't hang out with my Christian friends, because I'm a hypnotherapist, and that's devil work. And so I'm just kind of like completely in limbo in that regard, but which makes me tempted to just like, well, I just dropped the God thing, finally dropped the God thing. But I'm at the stage of examining what part of me is hanging on to the God thing.
Sure.
Is it because it's just easier? And is it because I haven't been convinced that there isn't a God, or I'm just defaulting to what I have been believing? Or is this going to be my, in a sense, vocation, that I'm even using the language that, like my vocation to the monastery, but my calling to the monastery, but this is going to be my life, is to be here where I believe in God, but that he's ineffable. It's more of a panentheism, God is everything and that more. So yeah, that's where I'm at with debating on that. It's just been so long that it seems like I would be where I need to be. Like most people I'm talking about deconstructing, they did it pretty quickly, and they're pretty happy with it. And so I don't know if I'm in the process or if I'm where I am to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly say the process looks different for everybody. And even the folks who, say it was like ripping off a Band-Aid, there was a lot of work to get to that point where they were, quote, so quickly moving through it. But it also makes sense to me that when you really value your like moral or spiritual or religious life, and when you are deep enough into it to be truly investigating the deeper mysteries, that you're also just not the type of person who's going to, on a lark, dramatically change your worldview. I really respect and appreciate the fact that you have been thoughtful and intentional and not in a mad dash to throw out something that you have investigated so thoroughly. And I think you're right to ask yourself, what is it I'm holding on to here and why? You don't have to justify that. Certainly don't have to apologize to me or to anybody else for it. But being curious about what am I needing out of this? What am I afraid of letting go is a very valuable question.
Yeah, and my childhood was very strange in that my parents weren't very religious at all. They had just started going to church again when I was coming around because they thought it's a good idea, it's a good upstanding thing to do, is to raise a child in the church. But I was, from as far as I can remember, I was obsessed with religion and obsessed with God. Like when I would go out in the backyard, I wouldn't play. I would go sit on a tree stump and stare at the sky for an hour.
Sure.
And my parents would be looking out there like, what is he doing? He's like 7 years old. Isn't he supposed to be like getting dirty or something? And so that might have something to do with it because I have owned at least that part of my faith for so long that I am still genuinely interested in philosophy and the philosophy of God and the philosophy of religion, and like watching Religion for breakfast and the guy whose name I keep forgetting, a great atheist who has a lot of degrees in theology that is genuinely interested in it. And like with ADHD is that I'm kind of subject to whatever I'm interested in because I can't force myself to be interested in whatever. And so I guess it's just a long journey to find out where I end up and if I am where I'm ending up.
Yeah. And I certainly have no desire or intentions to try and, quote, fix that for you. But, while we have you here on the line, I am curious if there is anything nagging at you that you would just appreciate somebody who's had these types of conversations before to walk through with you.
Yeah, definitely. That, I guess, like getting to what I'm still holding on to, that because like I've even pulled out my whole theological that like what the problem of evil is the one thing, the problem of suffering is that one thing that I can't, that when I think about it, I almost feel guilty still believing in God. Like you would believe in a God that would let these things happen.
Sure.
It almost causes a little bit of a panic in me to like, wait, but if, and then I just let it go there. So, but I'm not quite sure. I'm not very good with being articulate about it, but
yeah. Well, I certainly don't want to come in and speak with you for 10 minutes and try and like diagnose the problem. Right. But I would be very interested in how that sense of guilt is a real barrier here. You say like, how could I possibly believe in these things? And what's wrong with me that I would be willing to accept this? And I think that those are actually questions that you can answer. They don't just have to be rhetorical insults. Like, how could you have fallen for all of this? Or how could you have believed in this God? Well, as a child, you were introduced to this God by your parents, by your community, by the culture that you existed in. You were told over and over and over that this was not just a truth and a reality, but a moral good and a thing worth aspiring to and worth connecting with. I don't want to tell you your story, but I do want to say that you're not a bad person for having bought into so many of these ideas. And your willingness to pursue them, to have like sincere curiosity and to dedicate a portion of your life to pursuing all of this, none of that makes you evil or immoral or corrupt. And so while you are at this place of sort of working through should I or shouldn't I believe or what should I believe and all of those kinds of pieces, I guess I want to give you permission to make the choices that seem right and true and accurate for you, but also to let go of the self criticism and the shame that may be a part of what's keeping you in a place of stagnation and uncomfortable with moving forward. How does all that strike you?
Yeah, I think one of the main thing that's holding me back is that I don't feel like I can properly understand like the whole I don't feel like I have the intelligence to properly say like it. I kind of come up against a wall there where agnostic can kind of be like the answer of, and it's like the questions as you like kind of like when a child is asking why, and they keep asking why over and over again, and each time they ask over again it gets so much deeper and a bigger question, like why is the sky blue? Well, this and this. And like, well, why is that? And why is God? And then, whoa, gosh, that I almost holding out hope that there is some way that could be believed rightly. But you're right in that anytime I mostly find myself feeling frustrated and critical when I'm talking to a Christian than when I'm talking to an atheist. And also I have ADD, so I get kind of my mind kind of slips on me for a little bit. But yeah, is mainly that I don't feel like I have enough of mental power to say that God, whether God does or does not exist. And it seems plausible to me that God could exist. And while it seems plausible, I leave that door open.
Sure.
And then when I want to really be honest with myself, I'm kind of like, at least for now, I'm like, yeah, I kind of think he does. Not with having to call him he and all that stuff is all the mess of language. But
Yeah.
Well,
I have no right to like declare these labels over you, but I do want to say that the type of maybe soft atheism or agnosticism or whatever label we want to apply that you might fall under is actually still very much in keeping with the Atheist Community of Austin and some of our position statements about what we do and don't know about the world. I don't think that you are required to sign a pledge that says there absolutely never was any God, could never be, and never will be any sort of God ever, in order to find community in this community, to be straightforward about it. Just to say, I don't know that you have to have these firm answers to all of these questions. I'm glad that you're curious about them, and I can appreciate how you might feel a sense of comfort in knowing, but that's what a lot of life really is sort of examining the evidence, understanding what we can from it, and then accepting the conclusions that we are and aren't able to draw.
Yeah, it's like the most comfortable thing I can say is I don't know. And
Sure.
when it comes to it, like saying yes or no, the most comfortable response is for me to say is I don't know. And just to let that sit until for all in the many years it has sat up to this point, and let it continue. But it's really great to know that there is community out there that and people that actually like, because it is really ostracizing to like, and it's amazing how Christians can turn on you when you're no longer
Sure.
believing. It was a very conditional arrangement, and
I think there are also other types of communities that you might, I don't know how much you'd connect to them, but something like a universal Unitarian kind of group. They, what they feel like varies a lot from place to place, but there are definitely groups where you don't have to subscribe to any particular dogma, you don't have to have any particular beliefs, but there's still just sort of this underlying spiritual kind of component. And so I do think that there may also still be communities that you can plug into where, yeah, I agree. You don't have to be a hardcore atheist to find community. And I think there are a lot of us who feel like, I describe myself as an agnostic atheist, meaning that I don't know for sure that there's no God. Like, I don't think that there is, but at the same time, we're limited by our imaginations, and maybe there's some type of something out there that I just can't wrap my brain around. That's also a possibility. So yeah, I don't want you to feel alone, because I think there's a lot more people who are in your position.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I kind of taken over the whole show, but I didn't mean to take up this much time. But yeah.
Well, no, we really appreciate you coming up.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. I suppose the last thing that I'll point out is that it's not unique to Christianity or to religion, that really in any community or culture, the person we're most afraid of is not the total outsider. It's not the non-believer or the infidel. Like, it's the apostate. It's the person who turns their cloak and who walks away from it, because that's the apple that could spoil the whole batch. And I really recognize how painful it can be to lose your community and to lose your culture and to be labeled in those ways. And even if you don't believe you deserve it on any sort of intellectual level, I very much appreciate how guilt and self-criticism and self-doubt can creep into all of this, and how that can keep us stuck and keep us from really engaging with what we believe to be true and what we would really believe would be best for ourselves. So again, without trying to come in or act like a know-it-all, or certainly that I know much of anything about you, I would just really encourage you to give yourself permission to let go of any of that kind of self-criticism where you see it.
Yeah. And thank you so much for all that and everything you guys have helped me with just in this period of conversation here, and being accepting and all that. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on TikTok Live, I suppose.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Okay, let me see.
All right, thanks, you too.
Wait, do I pull him down? Oh, there, we're good. To anyone watching, like, if you see me, like, I keep looking down, it's because I'm running TikTok on my phone.
Navigating 3 separate streams. All right. Well, I do want to just take a quick moment to thank our top 5 patrons, as we do every week. In the number 1 spot, we, of course, have Oops All Singularity, 2 Dingleberry Jackson, Kalevi Helveti in the 3rd spot, our period in number 4, and Casey Kickendall in the 5th spot. Our honorable mention this week is Ted Dugan. Thank you to everybody who joins us on Patreon, and you can join that as well at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And with that, I want to, of course, thank Dr. Ben for helping us out today and for joining into the conversation. Ben, anything else that you want to add before we start to wrap up?
Not really. Just shout out to people joining in on the TikTok. I know this there are some growing pains, with figuring out how to do all the 3 streams at the same time. But I know the last couple times I've done the show, people have been really cool about joining and having conversations with us over there. So I just want to say, for people who are more TikTok inclined, feel free to, you don't have to be a contentious caller. You don't have to be wanting a debate per se. But if you're over there and you want to talk with us, definitely consider joining each week. We'd love to talk with you.
Beautiful. Well, I want to send out some love rings to our TikTok audience, but also especially to anybody who is sort of navigating losing their community or walking away from faith and the kind of self-judgment or the judgment from others that can come with that process. Who are you all sending love rings out to today?
Is that a question for us?
Not a very loving group. And I thought you would jump in first.
I'm sorry. The whole love ring thing is new to me.
I think we were both waiting for each other.
Okay.
I'm gonna send some out to all the audience members, and I'm also gonna send out some love rings to the crew that are doing amazing things behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, managing all of these streams. Is there anybody that you're pulling for or have a special place in your heart for this week?
Oh man. Yeah, for anybody who's feeling their world kind of falling apart and feeling alone.
Heard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, with that, I'll just say that if you don't believe, or if you are questioning, or you're sorting it out, or you're just looking for kind and generous people to have good philosophical conversations with, this is your community, and we appreciate you being here. And if you do believe, we definitely don't hate you. We're just not convinced.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth! So watch Truth Wanted Live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect online at tiny.cc/calltw.